Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working in E-commerce. I'm your host, Egan Heath from Caravan Digital. We're a direct-to-consumer e-commerce agency. We help with paid search, paid social, and email automation. And today, I have the good fortune of speaking with Kate Toon. She just recently won Australia's most influential small businesswoman. She's an expert on SEO, copywriting, and all things, small business marketing or e-commerce marketing. So, Kate, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us a little more about yourself and how you got into this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Egan. Yes, very proud of that award. I'm going to be boasting about that for many weeks to come. So I run a digital education business called Stay Tooned. And essentially it has three businesses underneath it. Clever Copywriting School, which teaches copywriters how to be better copywriters. The Recipe for SEO Success, which are courses and resources and a podcast teaching people how to grapple Google. And then finally, katetoon.com, which is my digital marketing mentoring program. So I'm all about DIYing your marketing as much as you can until you can afford to hire the good guys like you.
All right. That's well put. What sorts of mistakes do you see people making when they first come to you?
Just a real lack of understanding of how the internet works at a basic level. I've had people come on my course who aren't aware, of the difference between a browser and a search engine, and yet they have a website and yet they're spending $2,000 a month on an SEO agency. So that kind of idea of, I can't do that, it's too hard, so I'm going to put it in a pot over there, or I'm going to pay an expert and just trust them to do the right thing. And I mean, that would be lovely in business, but often you need to know a little bit to be able to keep your suppliers accountable. So I think just a real blindness to what's going on and a fear of digital marketing, a fear of the landscape as well.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you're really working with people who are just starting out, or in some cases they are. What sorts of things do you then start working on? It could be in the SEO realm, it could be in the copywriting realm. Where do you sort of start with the brand?
So, I mean, to be honest, it's all levels. You'd think that is startup people, but you'd be surprised. Some people have been in business for 5 years and still don't really understand it. They're good at what they do. They're great florists. They're great chiropractors, but they're not great at digital marketing. So, the base for me with everything I do from an SEO point of view is to start with an audit, to have a look at what they've got, have a look at their site speed, how responsive it is, how crawlable it is, what keywords they're ranking for, what backlinks they have, to give them a kind of, yardstick of where they're at and where they need to go. From a copywriting perspective, it's kind of an audit as well, to really go and look at their content and see if it actually is customer focused. Because, a lot of small business owners write what they want to say, not what the customer wants to hear. And just the copy is very stiff and staccato because they probably wrote it themselves. And everybody thinks they can write great copy, just like everyone thinks they have a great sense of humor and really good dress sense. You don't. And so, again, it's that audit to go through and say, have you ticked the basic boxes?
Yeah, that's well put. What, as you're going through copywriting, let's say you're going to do it for a site, you're going from the top. Let's say it's an e-commerce site. Where do you begin? What does your process look like?
It sounds cliche, but I will always start with trying to put together some kind of customer avatar. And I don't go with the whole, this is Clive, he's 57, he lives here, he has 2.3 children. I try and get more into what keeps Clive up at night. What's he worrying about? What are his desires and fears? And what would happiness look like to him? Because I think, too many businesses focus on the features rather than the benefits and advantages. You're selling some amazing new waterproof blanket and you're talking about how big it is and how much water it stores, but that's not what anyone cares about. They care about the dog weeing on the bed at 3 a.m. in the morning. So you need to get to the dog wee and get beyond the specification. So I always start with a customer avatar because it's always easier to write as if you're writing to one person. And think about what makes them tick. And I use, as I said, the BDF method: beliefs, desires, and fears. So what are the customer's preconceived beliefs about this product or brand? What are their deepest desires? What do they want this brand or product to solve? And what are their fears? What is going to stop them from purchasing and what's going to hold them back? So that's where I start.
Yeah, I like that example of the waterproof blanket of like what's the use case? I've heard the phrase jobs to be done, and we sort of looked into that framework a little bit of, yes, this is a waterproof blanket, but what specifically is the job to be done in your home? And then you can talk about here's the use cases, here's the benefits to you as the consumer, right?
Yeah, I mean, another little clever tactic when you're writing copy is I use this a lot. I have a little post-it note and it just says, so what? So what? So every line of copy I write, I ask the question afterwards, so what? So if you've written, this waterproof blanket can hold up to a litre of water, so what? Well, this means the dog can wee on it twice in the night and you still won't have to get up. So what? Well, that means you're going to get a better night's sleep. That is where we're getting, which means you're going to be happier, you're going to live a better life, you're going to, just be a better person. So, we need to push it all the way through. And so what is a really useful way to push yourself to get to that deeper, job to be done kind of idea.
Yeah, I like that. Sometimes the benefit is a few degrees removed from the feature. And so to really dig in pays off. That's a great example. You and I share a love for marketing copywriting here. Tell us a bit about, how did you learn it? Were there any books, websites, other resources that really helped you get good at this?
Well, I was lucky enough to work at Ogilvy in Australia for a little while. So I got to work on some big brands there. And then over in the UK, worked at advertising.com and worked on some big brands there. So I kind of had all that advertising experience under my belt. But I do think that big brands have different problems to solve than small business. So taking that big brand thinking and applying it to small business, you can't carry all of it across, unfortunately. But small businesses get some copywriting and the brand benefits that big businesses don't have. So I did that. I must admit, I'm not a big reader of copywriting books. I haven't even read David Ogilvy's book, but I spend a lot of time, probably far too much, on the internet, and I'm an avid reader. And I think not just of books, but of everything. And I think that consumption of creative material and just practice, really helps you be the best copywriter. You can read all the books in the world and do all the courses, but really the real learning is on the job,
Yeah, that's an awesome experience you've had. I love that. Is there an example that comes to mind of a product maybe you wrote a product description for, or something you can tell us? We can use the waterproof blanket, whatever's good, but talk us through, like what does a good product page description look like and how do you approach that?
Oh, it's my favorite thing to talk about, Egan. I mean, I've written product descriptions. One of my most challenging, I had to write about sponges. There's a brand of sponges in Australia called Chucks, and they have about 40 different types of sponges, but they're all essentially the same. They just have slightly thicker sponge or a green bit on top, or they've got a pink bit and a green bit. I'm sure you have those in America as well. So trying to write different product descriptions for the same product, because obviously you don't have duplicate product, and they wanted every variation as a separate page, was challenging. So I always start with a framework, especially for the description, the little blob of copy at the start. I just try and cover off who, what, why, when, where, how. So who would use this? Where would they use it? When would they use it? How would they feel when they're using it or after they've used it? Why would they use this rather than something else? And it's basic, but if you start with that, you can get a good few sentences out of that are unique to that product. With the sponges, it was hard. I had to pretend that, the thick sponge was for deep cleaners and the thin sponge was for those who didn't have much time. It was a bit of a stretch, but for most products, it's not a stretch. That who, what, when, how, why, and also trying to bring in sensuality. How does it feel on the skin? What does it smell like? How does it taste? Whatever's relevant there, trying to evoke emotion and basically give people the feeling, if relevant, that they're holding this thing in their hand, that they literally have it in front of them. Because that's the biggest frustration with online shopping, that it arrives. We've all seen those Wish memes where you've ordered a carpet and it arrives and it's 2 inches by 2 inches. We want to avoid that disappointment and also acknowledge the flaws in the product. If it is small, let's just make smaller benefit. If it is thin, let's make thinner benefit. But just be real and be honest and cover off that who, what, when, how, where, how.
Yeah, pretty interesting. That when you're talking about who, that reminds me of a Seth Godin thing about people like us do things like this. And so a good question to answer when someone's on a video presentation or someone's on a sales page or whatever is just, who is this for? Am I in the right place? Is this for me? Is this going to work for me? And so that's huge. I'm curious, what does the feedback loop look like? Do you ever get the data then on, this page converts so much, or, how do you know you're doing a good job as a copywriter?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of copywriters studiously avoid metrics and conversion metrics because it feels like a yardstick that they don't want to be measured against. So there's different metrics. I mean, obviously conversion is king and you want to make sure that you sell more of the product. I think focusing purely on sales is one thing. Obviously, brand awareness is another. Are you getting more branded search? Especially if you're doing copy for social media and Google and things. Are people stopping searching for waterproof blanket and starting to search for your brand? So that's a great goal. Then also, time on site. Especially if you're doing content as well as product descriptions. Have you managed to get people to stay on your page for like even just 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, that's they can read about 300 words in 1.5 minutes. So have you achieved that? Increases in time on site, increases on number of pages viewed, increases on email signups. And those are all metrics that I think copywriters can use, as well as conversion. I don't think if you're going to be a conversion copywriter and write for e-commerce brands, it has to be part of that. And you have to say, what is your current conversion rate? The same traffic's coming in. Can I increase that by just doing a bit of CRO on the site and just really making these product descriptions relevant? And as you said, connecting. I think when someone gets to your product description page, they already want to buy. They want to buy. You're just giving them the permission to buy and the feeling that they're not going to make a bad purchase decision. That's what you're trying to do, build that trust.
Yeah, I've heard that too, that, people, when they receive a product or when they buy something, they then have to maybe face their friends and family. Have I bought this? And like, do I look dumb for buying this? And so that's a fear we want to allay. How do you know, as you're breaking down the fears part of it in that framework you outlined, how do you discover what the fears are? How do you find those objections to kind of preempt them, in your marketing?
I think, a great thing for copywriters to do is to Google testimonials for the product or brand. If it's an existing brand, we have a site called Whirlpool. There's lots of different sites where you can read reviews. And in those reviews is often where people will talk about their fears. But I think you've hit the biggest fear on the head. No one wants to look stupid. People will do anything to avoid looking foolish from their peers. And so you're so right. That's such a great point, that what you're actually helping the person do is provide evidence that they can take back to their spouse or their friends to say, no, this was actually worth buying. Look, it says it's 99% waterproof. It says it's got 600 reviews and I've read them, that's what you're trying to provide for people. So I think testimonials, good and bad, are really, really important, and, facing the objections head on. So if you get a negative review, taking that and turning it into a positive as best you can, or acknowledging that is something this product doesn't do. Products can't be all things to all people. This product might not be right for you if, it's a big classic thing on sales pages, isn't it? Say who it's for, who it's not for. Eliminating the people who don't suit your brand and product is important. Good marketing is as much about repelling as it is about attracting, because one person who doesn't like it can do an awful lot of damage. People are much more likely to leave a negative review than a positive one. So I think it's just about addressing those objections head on.
Yeah, that's great. I've also seen it with you look at the Amazon reviews, maybe for competitor products, for your products, whatever it is, and look at those 1 and 3 stars and see, okay, if it was mixed, what did they like and not like about it? If they didn't like specifically, what did they not like? Even if it's this other product, and say, our product solves this issue. Like you're always kind of discovering those issues, those fears, and then, dealing with them. So that's great. What do you see on the SEO side, Kate? I think this is such a tough one. This has gotten so competitive. My perception is, by the way, that people in Australia, like SEO's got to be huge in Australia. Like when I was learning SEO, I was always finding people on YouTube there. So there must be something in the water out there. But, tell me a bit about, what do you see working in the wild for SEO these days? It's just gotten so difficult.
I think, the basic things don't work as quickly as they used to. I started in SEO, a good 15 years ago, and all you needed was a couple of keywords and a backlink and you were flying. So it has got more competitive, but also Google's worked really, really hard to level the playing field as much as they can. 5 or 6 years ago, if you typed in any product, you would only get eBay, Etsy and Amazon coming up at the top. Now, here in Australia, that doesn't happen anymore. There is a good mix of the big brands and the small brands. So I think, as it gets more competitive, you just have to go further down the tunnel to be more long tail with your keywords. You're not going to rank for waterproof blanket, but you might be able to rank for organic waterproof blanket Australia, especially here in Australia, we do not want to be ordering things from the US because we cannot wait 17 weeks for it to be shipped, So I think it's about, even though it feels very busy, there are still thousands and hundreds of thousands of keywords that A, have never been used before, or B, no one's going after. There are still opportunities. And I think smaller brands just need to mop up the crumbs. You're not going to get that golden keyword that's going to solve all your problem. It's going to be dozens and dozens of long tail keywords that add up to a whole that could be bigger than that one big fat keyword that you're craving and looking at with lust. So, and then I also think, the search engine results pages are busy and noisy, and it's really about just writing such a beautiful and strong title tag and meta description that you do stand out, and being aware that I don't want to buy from Amazon. Sorry, Amazon. I'd much rather support a small local business than give money to Jeff Bezos. So I have Amazon blindness. Do you remember we used to talk about banner ad blindness? People didn't see the banner ads anymore. You don't have banner ads anymore. I have Amazon blindness. I will actively not go to Amazon to try and find a small local business. And if that's the case, you need to make it clear that you are a small local business, because then I will support you. I don't know, again, we have a big buy local thing over here, and to try and not give money to the big corporate fat cats. So I think don't underestimate that people will go to position 4, 5, and 6 if position 1, 2, and 3 is full of big corporates.
If it's okay, I'd like to change gears a little bit, Kate, and just ask you a bit about, personal branding. It seems like you're an expert there. You're an award-winning businesswoman in Australia. How do you approach personal brand? You've got multiple podcasts. Just let me hear you talk about that a little bit and how you think, it fits into business for you.
Well, I think it's been an evolution. I started off thinking that I had to have a big professional brand, and hence these sub-brands, the Recipe for SEO Success and the Clever Copywriting School, because I was under the misconception that no one would want to buy from me, that I had to look like the big guys. Again, massive misconception, because I can never compete. I'm not a we, I'm an I, and I was when I started. So that was kind of a mistake. And if I had my time over, would I create all these sub websites? No, I may have product names, but I wouldn't have created these separate brands. So over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been kind of bringing everything back to Kate Toon. And I think, the world at the moment is a wobbly place, right? It's been a wobbly few years. And we really want to buy from people and brands who we feel have values that align with our own. We don't want to buy from someone and find out that they're, cutting down the rainforests or whatever. So to express that, I have to know what my values are, what I stand for and what I don't stand for. And I have to express that online. And that can be scary, but that is personal branding. It's not just about your brand personality. It's about, what do you stand for in this cold, dark world? What would you never do? What annoys you about the industry that you're in and that you want to challenge? And that, that makes you can make you a bit controversial, and it can be difficult. Not everyone's going to like you if you stop being vanilla and start showing who you are. But that is the key to personal branding, showing up as you with your flaws, your quirks, and your values.
Yeah, that's great. That almost reminds me of, even at that level of product page, say who this isn't for. It sounds like even as a brand, kind of at least imply or make it very clear who you're not for, and be okay with that.
Yeah. And I mean, again, most brands, these days are trying to put a figure in front of the brand. There's a person who represents that brand. Even big banks, you don't get an email from customer service agent 1. They pretend you're talking to Sue. Now, Sue is probably 17 different people, but they try to make you feel you're talking to a person. And this is the problem that big brands have. We don't believe you. But small brands, we do believe you. We know that you're a mom and pop business. We know that if we buy from you, you're going to do a dance in your kitchen because now you can afford to take the kids on a trip to wherever. And that's meaningful to us, that smaller connection. So I think smaller brands need to play up the personal. It's not about sharing all your secret stuff or all your sad stories or pictures of your kids if you don't want to. There's boundaries. But at least let me know who you are. Why did you start the business? What do you care about? I think that's what people want to know.
That's great. Well, I definitely recommend people check out katetoon.com, Kate, Kate, and then Toon, Toon, which has a good association for us in the States. That's like cartoons, like that's fun. And it's a very fun and whimsical site.
I used to get called Looney Tunes at school. It still applies. It was a painful surname as a child, but it served me very well as an adult because there's not many Kate Toons in the world.
Right on. Well, that's great. Tell us where we can find you online. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about the membership, and just if people want to learn more, who's a good person to reach out to, and where can they find you?
Well, I am my brand. So if you do reach out for me to any channel, it will be me. I do have a team of minions, but I handle all my inquiries myself because I think that's important. So yeah, Kate Toon is the starting off point. From there, you can find my other websites, my courses, my 3 podcasts. I'm an overachiever, and I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter under Kate Toon as well. So pretty hard to avoid. Once you type Kate Toon into Google, the Tooniverse will be revealed.
All right. Well, we will have to have you back on, Kate. You're very fun. This is great. I definitely recommend people check out Kate's brands and podcast here. This is just awesome. So, Kate, thank you for joining us an early morning there, all the way from Australia, and what's working in e-commerce.
Thank you so much.